So a peanut looks like this. Now what an sp3 looks like is essentially one end of the orbital is much fatter or bigger than the other end. So actually when we're drawing sp3, we don't draw this little end, but more so focus on the big lobe. So what that means is these 4 sp3 orbitals, what it looks like is essentially this. So this is like each one of these lobes, I'm going to draw it bigger so I can actually write inside. Each one of those lobes is an sp3. Okay, so when you're drawing your pictures, it's important that you also label all of your drawings, because when you're doing this, it's going to be hard for me to tell, are you drawing sp3 or are you drawing p, or are you drawing sp2? When we learn about the other ones, you'll notice that as well. So each hydrogen is a 1s. So the 1s is a sphere. So each one of those is representing our rectangle. So here's an sp3 overlapping with a 1s, and there are 4 of them. So this is carbon, hydrogen, etc., etc. So let's go back, right? So if you go here to the sp3s, you'll notice that the shape this takes on, and we're going to talk more about shapes in the next lesson, is called a tetrahedral shape. So meaning it has 4 of these lobes, these sp3 lobes. Okay, so let's take a look at here is our sp3 again. So here is the 1s and the 3p combining to make the 4 sp3s. So notice in these diagrams, actually they kept that little, see how there's one big lobe and the little knob at the end? So it's like big and little. So here they actually kept those little pictures. When you are going to draw them, you don't have to add in those little parts. You just simply just ignore that. So all you would do is draw the larger end. I just find it's easier to do. So there's our methane. Okay, sp2 hybridization. So remember there's 3 in total. So sp3 we've already done. sp2. This is where you have one 1s orbital that is going to be forming a hybrid with 2 2p's. So here we go. Here's boron, for example. So boron, if you look at the structure that we're drawing here, boron trifluoride looks like this. And of course, these fluorines are full. Okay. So this is showing that we have, I'm not able to do that. Okay. Anyway, so this is showing that boron is able to make 1, 2, 3 bonds, right? But if we look at boron's energy level diagram, this is showing that boron can only make 1 bond. So a signal to kind of look for, how do you know if something is hybridized or not, is that the bonding capability does not match the number of half-filled orbitals that are in its atom. So boron has 1 half-filled orbital, but this is showing it can make 3. So that's how we know that we're going to hybridize these. So instead of having 2 in the S and 1 in the P, it makes 3 half-filled orbitals. So now those 3 half-filled orbitals are able to make sigma bonds with those fluorine. So we have 3 times sp2 that are created. So we can see here what happens is we have, actually it's better if I just maybe draw this ourselves. So we have boron with our 3 fluorine. Okay, so boron we know is going to make 3 half-filled orbitals that are sp2 type. Each of those fluorines that's going to be overlapping with boron is, if you notice, the only half-filled orbital that exists is going to be a 2p. So really what's going to happen is we're going to have a 2p for each of those fluorines. I'm going to use blue for fluorine. So we're going to have fluorine, 2p. We're going to have another fluorine. I'm just separating them so we can see a distinct difference in each fluorine. So here we're going to have a sigma bond between one sp2 and 2p. Here's another sigma bond between this second fluorine and boron. And then we're going to have a third sigma bond between the last fluorine and the sp2. So those are our sigmas here. Now, when you go to draw these, sp2 looks pretty much the same as sp. You have a big lobe and a little lobe. So when you're drawing this, you only need to draw this larger lobe. So my boron, I'll keep them as red, is going to have 3 sp2 orbitals. Okay, now what's overlapping with it? It's not hydrogen this time, but it's going to be fluorines, right? The 2p. So here is a 2p from fluorine, right? There's a sigma bond. Here's another 2p from a different fluorine. And here is my last fluorine 2p. So there are 3 2p's because each one is from a different fluorine and they are overlapping with sp2. All right, so here you can see we have, here are our 3 sp2's. We are going to have sp2, 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 and then here are our 2p's. Now you're probably noticing, well, there's one here that says it's an uncharged or unchanged p orbital. What this is talking about is the orbital that was actually originally empty. So you know how there are 3 2p's originally? Well, really there is an extra box here that is empty. Okay, but it's not really used for bonding in this particular case because we only have 3 electrons, right? You can only have orbitals in existence that actually have electrons within them. So usually when I'm drawing them, you'll notice that I did not add in that empty orbital because we're only drawing orbitals that involve bonding. Okay, so just so you know, that does exist, it's just empty. So it doesn't really affect our boron example. Okay, so then the last type of hybridization that you're going to need to know is called an sp hybridization. So this is now where you're going to have 2 electrons that are going to be blended into a hybrid. So one example here will be BeF2. Okay, so this is originally beryllium difluoride. So here we're going to have beryllium. Notice that beryllium has no half-filled orbitals. So this is actually showing that beryllium can make 0 bonds, but we do know that beryllium can make 2 bonds. So here's our beryllium with our fluorines. So what happens is these orbitals are going to blend and these 2 are going to spread out into 2 half-filled orbitals. So the 2 half-filled orbitals now allow for these 2 bonds to be made. You need a half-filled orbital in order for that to happen. So what ends up occurring is you're going to have 2 sp orbitals that are able to overlap with fluorine. So let me draw this like when we were doing our drawings here before. So we will do this. Do them in a different color. Right? So our beryllium has 2 half-filled sp orbitals. And we are doing fluorine, right? So we're going to have fluorine, which is a 2p. Right? This is fluorine. I forgot to add in my beryllium label. So these 2 are both coming from beryllium. We have 1 fluorine bonding with 1 to make a sigma. And we're going to have a second fluorine that is a 2p also that is creating a sigma bond with the other sp. Now, similar to before, sp has one larger end and one little end, but remember that you're only drawing the larger ends. So what this will look like is you're going to have two sp orbitals. So here are my two beryllium sps. And you're going to have a fluorine 2p on either end. Right, so here's fluorine, our two berylliums, and then another fluorine. So that's what this is showing you here. So this is an sp, and this is one fluorine. So here's a sigma bond, and here is our other sigma bond with the other fluorine. So again, there are orbitals that are there that are empty, right? So we are not really going to be considering them when you're doing your drawings because we're only doing drawings of orbitals that are involved in bonding. Okay. So that ends our sp3, sp2, sp hybridization. So this is a nice little summary. This is actually from your textbook. It's in section 4.2, where it basically will review the sp, sp2, and sp3 configurations. Now, I mentioned the tetrahedral shape for the sp3. sp2 is trigonal planar, and sp is linear. Okay, so the two sps are in a direct line. Now, we're going to go over shapes. So we have tetrahedral, trigonal planar, and linear. We're going to spend a whole lesson just looking at the shapes of molecules. Actually, that's our next lesson that's coming up. So don't worry, we're going to go over all of that again. So the last part to this lesson, so we've actually already talked about sigma bonds, but we'll look at it again, is we're going to look at what happens when you have a double bond or a triple bond. So let's recap. So sigma bonds are created where you have an overlap of two orbitals. So you can have a variety of overlaps, right? We've seen S's can overlap, P's can overlap, you can have a P and an S overlapping, or you can have hybrids overlapping as well. So anytime you have an overlap of this end-to-end overlap, these are sigma bonds, right? And we've seen all the examples we've done up till now have shown those types of bonds. Okay, but there is a new type of bond that we are going to look at called pi bonds. These bonds only exist in multiple bonds. So we're talking about double bonds or triple bonds. Okay, so what is the difference between a pi bond and a sigma bond? So a sigma bond is an end-to-end overlap. So notice the p orbitals are overlapping each other at this point. What a pi bond is a side-by-side interaction. So what's happening here is the orbitals are able to, the electrons, you have to imagine there's one electron in each of these p orbitals, they're able to share the space above and below the plane of that bond. Whereas these electrons can move anywhere within the p orbitals. Here you have a side-by-side interaction compared to the end-to-end interaction. Okay, now when you have multiple bonds, you still need a sigma bond, but you're introducing this concept of a pi bond. So let's recap. So if you have a single covalent bond, that means you only have a sigma bond. All right, so all the ones we've been looking up till now have been those. If you have a double bond, what that means is you end up having one sigma and one pi bond. If you have a triple bond, what happens is you have a sigma and you have two pi bonds in addition to that sigma. So we're going to look at some examples of double and triple bonds, of course, going forward here.